Welcome to the Virginia DECA State Leadership Conference Judges Orientation for Written Event Judges. As a judge at our state conference, you will have a front row seat to evaluate Virginia's most talented members in our organization. Your real-world expertise is greatly appreciated and valued as an integral part of our competitive events program. Virginia DECA is preparing emerging leaders and entrepreneurs in a variety of fields: marketing, finance, hospitality, and management. Our competitive events program allows students to integrate what they're learning in the classroom into their DECA competitive events, apply that learning, connect to businesses, and promote competition. As we work to accomplish our mission, DECA is preparing the next generation of leaders to be academically prepared, community-oriented, professionally responsible, and experienced leaders. At our state conference, approximately 4,000 marketing students from across the state will come to Virginia Beach for 3 days of events, activities, and leadership training. Competitive events participants are ultimately trying to qualify for our International Career Development Conference in Orlando, Florida in April. Today I want to provide you with some overall information about our written events. The components that make up our written events show you how the written papers will be judged and what is involved in judging the presentations on the day of our state leadership conference. Let's start by discussing exactly what a written event is and what it's comprised of. Written events are comprised of two basic components. Students in teams of 1 to 3 prepare a written paper prior to the day of competition. This page will be either 10 or 20 pages depending on the event topic and those guidelines. The papers are judged based on a rubric provided. On the day of competition, judges will evaluate the oral presentation of the paper, also using the rubric that is provided. Scores are a combined total of the paper and the presentation to determine the overall winners in each category. The written papers are judged in one of two ways. Most of our papers are judged prior to competition day. Judges are given access to an online portal and have approximately 2 weeks to score the papers that they've been assigned. There are a few events that the judge will read on site the day of competition. These are our 10-page papers. They don't take as long to read, and the rubric is a combined rubric with the paper and the presentation together. This is why those need to be read on the day of competition, and there are only 3 of those events, the integrated marketing campaign events. Let's start with judging the written paper, since that is what all of our written event judges will do first. For all of our written events, except for those 3 that I mentioned previously, the integrated marketing campaign events, you will be sent details in mid-February about how to access those papers online. You'll have approximately 2 weeks to evaluate the papers that you have been assigned, likely be 10 to 16 papers. You will be evaluating the papers of the same students that you will be hearing the presentations for on the day of competition. As you get started to look at the papers, the first thing I would recommend is that you review the event guidelines and the evaluation rubric. This will allow you to become familiar with the content that you'll be reading and to become familiar with the scoring system. You do not need to print the papers. That is entirely up to you if you prefer to read on paper rather than on the screen. All of the scoring documents are online for you. On the day of competition, you do not need to have anything printed. Everything will be provided for you, and we will be providing a copy of the executive summary for each of your papers so that you all have a printed reference for each presentation. A few hints for you as you read the papers. We ask, please don't give perfect scores. Our students need some feedback in terms of where they need to improve, and don't anticipate having perfect papers at this point. Once you've scored the paper, please leave some feedback for those students. This is the only way they'll know how to improve their papers and learn from the process. And our top papers will be advancing to our International Career Development Conference, and they'll have the opportunity to make improvements for those papers, so your feedback online will be very valuable to them. If there are spelling or grammatical or any other writing areas, those can be reflected in the overall impression at the end of the rubric. As you read through the papers, it might help to determine the actual score you want to give by asking yourself some questions. Will this work? Is what they're writing about realistic? Does the writer seem to be knowledgeable? Overall, would I approve this proposal, or did the project achieve its goals? These might help you determine the actual numerical score for each item on your rubric. All of the rubric scores are divided into 4 basic categories. The numbers in each of those categories can be determined by looking at what that category is looking for. If the score falls in the exceeds expectation range, those will be your most effective presentations or effective papers. Very creative, couldn't expect anything more. The meets expectations, these are your norm, maybe a few minor problems or omissions, but nothing really significant. So if you wish to give a score in the range that meets expectations, that's what you would be looking at. Below expectations, those score ranges does not meet the minimum standard of what you would find acceptable. And then the last category, little or no value. These would be papers that contain significant flaws in that item, and that's where you would score them. As I mentioned, you'll receive more detailed instructions about judging the written papers online in mid-February. Let's move on now to judging the presentation. These will happen on the day of our State Leadership Conference on March the 2nd. When you arrive the day of competition, you'll be checked in, receive a welcome packet, introduced to all of the people that will be running your event, and taken to your area. We will have some breakfast items available for you, and your event director will give you some specific training for your event and any details that you need at that time. You will have lunch during your shift. We do ask that you turn off phones. We don't want a phone to inadvertently go off during a student presentation. That would be very disturbing to the students. During breaks or in between students, if you need to check your phone, that would be perfectly appropriate. The dress for the day, we ask judges to abide by whatever dress code might be at your place of employment. Generally speaking, that is business professional or business casual. Our students will be dressed in professional attire. On the day of competition, the first thing you'll do is again review the presentation rubric and the Scantron that will be used for judging. Each team has a maximum of 15 minutes to present and answer any questions. You don't need to worry about timing. We'll have adult assistants that do that for you. Teams can incorporate any visual aids, presentation boards, flip charts, laptops, etc. They can hand you material that relates to the presentation, but they should not be leaving anything with you other than a paper item. A few general guidelines as you listen to the presentations. Students have prepared their presentation with a set format in mind that they're planning for. We ask the judges not interrupt the students with questions as they present. If the students have time left at the end of their presentation, that would be the appropriate time to ask any questions. We ask that you stay in your role as indicated in the event guidelines and try not to interact personally with the students during their presentations. It is important that you not give students any indication of how they did when they are finished. Your attempt to be kind and encouraging will likely be interpreted by the students as that they are going to be winning. Please don't give any feedback to the students other than what is on the Scantron. Please be consistent all day. If you do something one way with your first group, do the same thing with the rest of the groups you see during the day. Even if that is an error or a mistake, please make sure that each group you see has the same experience with you during the day. In scoring the presentations, we ask you, just like with the written paper, not to give perfect scores. You'll be scoring each item on the rubric according to how well the team covered that specific topic. The professionalism and appearance of the team can be evaluated in the overall impression category at the end of the rubric. We will ask that you avoid ties and initial each score sheet. Your event directors will be going over those details with you when you arrive on site. As you move through the day, you'll have a lot of paper on your table. You may want to hang on to the first 2 to 3 score sheets to kind of get a feel of how the presentations are going and get your scoring system down. After you've heard 2 to 3 presentations, you'll have a good idea of what to anticipate for the rest of the day. And then that way, as you hear additional groups, you can begin handing the score sheets of those groups that you know will not be in your top few teams over to the adult assistants, who can then go ahead and begin bubbling score sheets and verifying scores. This allows you to hang on to the top 2, 3, 4 teams as you work through the day. At the end of the day, then you'll be holding your top teams, and you can adjust any of those scores as you see fit at that time. Once you've heard all of the teams assigned to you during the day, the adult assistants at your event will verify scores. They'll count all of your score sheets to make sure we've accounted for all of the teams. They'll have a very quick evaluation of your experience that they'll ask you to fill out, and that will conclude your day with us. That concludes our overview of what to expect in judging our State Leadership Conference written events. We can't thank you enough for taking the time and energy to judge our students at our conference. A conference of this size could certainly not be possible without you. We look forward to seeing you when you arrive on site on March the 2nd. Thanks so much.